Hi everyone, for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Lauren-Jane, I'm an F2. You can find me on Instagram at The Surgical Doctor. This video is about books that I love, medical books. I love medicine, I love surgery, and I love books. So this is my favourite type of video to make. So these books aren't in any order, they're just 5 books that I've read and I want to review. So this is the first one. So you might have seen this one, it's on all the shelves and Waterstones. So War Doctor by David Knott. David is he is a surgeon, and this book is what it says on the tin. So he's a war doctor. He's been to all kinds of war zones. Honestly, I have to tell you, I literally read this book like this. I actually couldn't put it down because I just wanted to kind of get through it and make sure he was okay. I actually read the back, halfway through because I was so worried that he wasn't going to get out alive. I mean, this stuff is nail biting. This guy is very, very brave. Some might say reckless. It's a really interesting frontline account of what it's like to work in these war zones. I mean, Dr. Knott has been everywhere. He's put his life in danger. He's been, nearly blown up many, many times. So it's a really, really interesting, really good read. I really recommend this one as doctor memoirs go. I'd probably go so far as to say this is one of my favourites. He's a good writer as well. Sometimes you find that with memoir books where people are writing not primarily as writers, that the writing can be a bit clunky, a bit off-putting. Not the case. This is a great book. I give this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Book number 2, The Mystery of the Exploding Teeth and Other Curiosities. So this is a book about interesting medical case histories from the past. I liked this book. I do like that kind of like historical record. I'm interested in the history of medicine. We used to do some very odd and very crazy things to patients in the olden days. There's a really interesting story here about someone who basically had, I think it was a heart attack on a golf course, and there's kind of the stuff that they put this guy who'd clearly passed away through, like they were blowing tobacco smoke up his bottom to try and revive him. Which is a very interesting bit of medicine to read. I would say, well, if you've seen my previous video, you'll know that I reviewed The Butchering Art. This is also medical kind of case histories. If you read this and you really liked it, this is for you. If you haven't read this one's better. So of the two, if you can only pick one, I think this one's much more interesting. It might be because this focuses more on surgery, and I'm really interested in surgery. This one is very good for the first kind of half, and then it kind of loses a bit of interest for me. But it is a good read. If you loved this and you want more, this is for you. If you're not really interested in medical case histories and you want to just dip a toe into the water, this is probably the better one. I reviewed this in my previous video. Kind of give this 3.5 stars. There's some interesting stories in there, but it's not my favourite book on this list. So the next one I've got is Prison Doctor. So this is similar to War Doctor. It's an account of Dr. Brown, who was a GP for 20 years, looking for a new challenge, moved into being a doctor in prisons. She's worked in many different types of prisons, children's, women's, men's. And it's a good kind of account of an interesting profession. One of the things these books highlights for me is how amazing and interesting our profession is, because you can do so many things with a medical degree. You can work in a war zone, you can work in a prison, you can work in a hospital. And the things we do are all very different from each other, which is why medicine is so fantastic for different types of personalities, because there's a very big difference in the working life of this person and the working life of this person, which I find really interesting. Medicine fascinates me. I just can't get enough of it. That's why I read all these books. One of the things I like about this book is that it's written by a woman. You will tend to find, or I've tended to find, that the majority of these memoir books are written by men at the end of their careers, which is interesting and it's good. But it is nice to have a female perspective, so I liked it for that point. I will say it didn't grab me as much as, say, War Doctor did or Unnatural Causes. I'd give it a 3.5. If you read kind of Unnatural Causes and War Doctor, or Do No Harm, and you're looking for your next kind of doctor memoir, worth picking up. I would call it a bit of a summer read, so you can kind of pick it up and put it down. But if you're just dipping a toe into this kind of genre, I'd start with War Doctor or Unnatural Causes. 3.5 stars. The next one I don't have the book for because I've lost it, which is a shame because I wanted to send it to someone. It's Unnatural Causes by Richard Shepherd. I absolutely loved this book. It's informative, it's engaging, some really interesting stories about being a forensic pathologist. Dr. Shepherd's worked on some really prominent cases, which you will know. For me, it's up there with War Doctor. It's really interesting, 4.5 stars. Okay, Dr. Sachs, Everything in Its Place. Bit of a change in tone for this one. Whilst they're all non-fiction books, the majority of the books that I'm showing you are kind of memoirs. If you're familiar with Dr. Sachs and you like his books, I definitely recommend this one. If not, if you're new to Dr. Sachs, so Oliver Sacks was a prominent British neurologist who lived and worked in New York for the majority of his life. He was a very interesting chap. If you haven't heard of him, he's the chap from Awakenings. So in the 1920s, there was something called the sleeping sickness, which is the thing that I can never pronounce. Encephalitis lethargica, which is an illness that affected the brain. And what happened is that people gained Parkinsonian kind of symptoms and they went into what was effectively sort of a locked-in type of coma. They weren't responsive. And these people were left like this for 40 years. Most of them ended up in psychiatric homes. And people very much believed that there was no one there. So Dr. Sachs is a young doctor in this period. He's working in New York, and he kind of meets these patients, becomes very fascinated by them, and actually starts working with them. He gives them dopamine, L-Dopa, which is a synthetic dopamine, and actually he's able to bring these people who have been in a coma for 40 years back into the world. And it's an amazing story. If you haven't read Awakenings, I definitely recommend it as one of my top 10 ever medical books. Such an amazing thing that Dr. Sachs did. It's also filmed with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams, if you want the abridged version. So that's what Dr. Sachs is best known for. This is one of his later books. Actually, Dr. Sachs passed away recently. So this book is, it's part clinical cases, because typically Dr. Sachs tends to write about fascinating neurological cases, rare things like Charles Bonnet syndrome, those kind of things. There's a little bit of clinical cases in here, but it's also sort of part memoir. That was the bit that I really liked. He talks about, Dr. Sachs has this really amazing thirst for knowledge. He's a true polymath, and you really see in this book where that comes from, this thirst for knowledge that he had for biology, for chemistry. And it's interesting to see kind of behind the lens of who the man was. If you're a big Dr. Sachs fan, I think this book is for you. The last bit of the book is just a collection of essays of his. They're not all related to medicine. Some of them are some quite off-the-wall topics. I can't think of any offhand, but Dr. Sachs is just so interested in everything, really. There's one here about why we need gardens. I would say if you're new to Dr. Sachs, start with Awakenings, or if you were interested in his clinical cases, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is a good read. If you are someone who is more well-versed in Dr. Sachs, I loved this. I definitely recommend it. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 just because I'm such a Dr. Sachs fangirl. So that's that. This is a whistle-stop tour of my top 5 recent medical books. I've made a similar video doing my previous 5 books. There's some really interesting titles on there if you want to watch that one, like When Breath Becomes Air, Do No Harm by Dr. Marsh. So thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to. Thank you. Bye.